The night I caught Ben with Mia, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even slam the door. I just stood there, holding the Thai takeout I had walked 4 blocks to pick up, while my so-called boyfriend of 3 years tangled himself in sheets with my roommate. Mia looked up first, her expression slipping from shock to smugness in less than a second. Ben turned pale and muttered my name like it meant something. I placed the bag of food on the hallway table, turned around, and left the apartment without saying a word. Not a single syllable. The doorman raised an eyebrow when I came down with a suitcase 2 hours later, dragging it behind me like a corpse I no longer had to carry. I told him I was going away for the weekend. He nodded and went back to his phone. But I wasn't going away. I was going next door. Literally. The luxury high-rise on the corner, the one they both used to mock for being full of trust fund babies and crypto bros, had just finished renovations. I had been watching the listings for months. Unit 17B was finally available, and I signed the lease in less than 6 minutes. I paid in full. With money neither Ben nor Mia knew I had. Because while they were playing house in a cramped 2-bedroom walk-up with peeling paint and leaky faucets, I had been quietly building something. A tech platform called Vesta. A networking tool for women in business, disguised as a sleek productivity app. They thought I was just a UX intern. That I spent my nights coding for fun and sleeping with noise-canceling headphones to block out their late-night Netflix marathons. They never noticed the VC meetings I took on lunch breaks, the lawyer I met with on Sunday mornings, the angel investor who wired $250,000 to my account the day before I moved out. I didn't post about the apartment. I didn't update my LinkedIn. I let them think I was still crashing on a friend's couch in Queens. I watched them through floor-to-ceiling windows while sipping champagne and onboarding a new developer in Berlin. I watched them argue, then kiss, then argue again. I watched Ben leave every morning in the same wrinkled button-down, trying to launch a startup he couldn't even explain at dinner parties. I watched Mia pretend to be a wellness influencer, filming unboxing videos for free supplements in borrowed sports bras. I watched, and I waited. 6 months passed before I saw Ben's name again, this time in an applicant pool. Vesta had just opened a hiring round for our expansion into internal business development. The role was mid-level. Remote first. Base salary was decent. The hiring manager flagged him. His resume wasn't bad, though it was filled with half-truths and puffed-up jargon. But I knew that already. I had heard him lie about his achievements so many times, I could recite them in my sleep. What he didn't know was that I was the one who made the final hiring call. I saw his cover letter. It was short. A bit arrogant. Typical Ben. He wanted a challenging environment with upward potential and a strong female-led culture. I nearly choked. I approved his first-round interview. Just to see if he'd recognize the product. He didn't. He called it an app with interesting traction and said he'd love to optimize the monetization strategy. He passed to round 2. Then 3. He didn't realize who I was. My name wasn't on the website. The leadership tab listed only the COO and CTO. I preferred it that way. Let people underestimate me. It made everything sweeter. When his final interview landed on my calendar, I cleared the rest of my day. It was scheduled for 11 a.m. sharp. He logged in at 10:59, wearing a shirt I had bought him for our 2nd anniversary. He looked older. More tired. But still cocky. "Hi," he said, flashing that same charming smile he used to use to talk his way out of everything. "I'm Ben." I tilted my head slightly. "I know." His smile wavered. "I'm sorry, let's begin," I cut in. He fumbled. "Of course. Sure. Should I start with why I'm interested in the role?" I watched him sweat. Watched him try to recover. Watched him realize, slowly, who I was. He stared. His voice faltered. And I just smiled. Let him talk. Let him sell himself. Let him beg for a job at the company I built while he slept beside someone else. I asked him about his weaknesses. He said he worked too hard. I asked him what he knew about our company culture. He paused. Said he liked the design of the app. Said it felt inclusive. I let the silence stretch until he squirmed. And then I leaned forward, finally speaking with the full weight of who I was. "You're not a good fit," I said calmly. "Best of luck in your search." His mouth opened. Closed. "Wait, are you?" I ended the call. Then I opened the next candidate's file. A woman named Taylor. Smart. Focused. Her references glowed. I scheduled her interview for the next day. From my new office, high above the city, where the sun hit the windows just right and everything I had built sparkled with promise. It wasn't revenge. Not really. I didn't sabotage Ben's chances. I didn't blacklist him. I didn't post screenshots or tell anyone about what happened in that apartment. I just built something better. And when he wandered into it, blind and desperate, I let him trip over the empire he once ignored. The story could have ended there. But the thing about power is, it ripples. Once you taste control, it changes how you move through the world. I didn't just want to forget the past. I wanted to rewrite my future so thoroughly that nothing from before could touch it. That's why I said yes when the investor from London called. He wanted to bring Vesta to the UK. I told him I'd consider it if we could open with a summit. A full-day event. Women founders. Top speakers. Luxury hotel ballroom. Fully catered. And I wanted to choose the venue. So I chose the one where Mia always said she wanted to get married. A crystal chandelier kind of place, with gold trim and velvet chairs. She used to pull up pictures of it during brunch, talking about how she'd walk down the aisle there one day, how she'd make sure her wedding went viral. I rented the ballroom under an event planning shell company and hosted the launch summit there. We sold out in 3 days. I stood on stage under the spotlight, wearing a custom suit from a designer Mia couldn't pronounce, and talked about resilience. About vision. About staying quiet when everyone else expected noise. The applause was thunderous. But the real applause came from within. That quiet, sharp satisfaction of knowing you'd turned hurt into hardware. That same week, Ben reached out again. This time through a mutual acquaintance who didn't know our history. He asked if I'd reconsider. Said he was open to freelance work. Said he believed in the mission. I didn't reply. I forwarded his message to HR, flagged his name for internal tracking, and moved on. Mia tried next. She emailed the event planning inbox. Asked if there were any internships available with the team that had hosted the summit. Said she was passionate about branding and had a great aesthetic sense. I stared at her email for a long time. Her resume was attached. It still listed that lifestyle blog she started and abandoned after 10 posts. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She wasn't the enemy. She was a symptom. Of a version of me that once apologized for taking up space. That version had died the moment I walked out of that apartment with nothing but a suitcase and a USB drive. I moved on to real competition. Vesta was growing fast. Too fast. We needed to raise again, but this time I wanted more than capital. I wanted influence. I wanted partnerships with firms that shaped industries. So I booked meetings with the gatekeepers. Men in fitted suits who loved the sound of their own voices. Women who had clawed their way up and didn't have patience for fluff. I knew the code. I spoke it fluently. And I made sure every pitch ended with a reminder of what I'd built from nothing. They didn't always say yes. But they never forgot me. I signed 2 new deals in under a month. Expanded the dev team. Opened an office in Toronto. And bought the walk-up where Ben and Mia used to live. I didn't evict them. That would have been too obvious. I just doubled the rent when the lease was up. Watched from a distance as they scrambled, moved out, blamed the market. The doorman didn't recognize me when I stopped by one afternoon to collect the keys. I wore sunglasses. A silk scarf. I smiled politely, said I was the new owner. He handed me the set with a nod. Hope you have better luck than the last tenants, he said. They fought a lot. I just nodded. Inside, the apartment was smaller than I remembered. The kitchen tiles were still cracked. The living room smelled faintly of cheap cologne. I stood in the bedroom where I used to sleep beside a liar and stared out the window at my building. At my home. At the version of myself who had risen from this ruin. Then I turned, walked out, and handed the keys to a single mother I had met through a mentorship program. Told her rent was covered for 6 months. Said I liked investing in women with plans. That night, I opened a bottle of wine on my balcony and watched the lights go out next door. My phone buzzed. Another pitch deck approval. Another podcast invite. Another reminder that I was no longer the girl in the hallway with the takeout bag. I was the one writing the story now. And I wasn't done. The invitation arrived 3 weeks later. Hand-delivered. Heavy cream cardstock. Embossed gold lettering. Mia and Ben cordially invite you. I stopped reading. I didn't need to. The irony was laughable. After all the chaos, the affair, the scrambling, they were getting married. The wedding was scheduled at some countryside estate upstate, the kind of place that did horse-drawn carriages and drone footage. It wasn't a real invite. It was bait. A performance. Mia must have known I'd see it. She probably thought it would sting. But I didn't feel anger. I felt amusement. Because in that moment, I realized just how far they still were from understanding me. They still thought this was a contest. That I was keeping score. They didn't see that I had already won. Still, I kept the invitation. Not out of sentiment. Out of curiosity. What kind of people invited the woman they betrayed to a wedding they could barely afford? The answer came sooner than expected. A friend from our college circle sent me a message. Apparently Mia had posted a vlog about her rags to riches love story. Glossed over the roommate betrayal. Painted me as the emotionally distant ex who left them to be happy. She ended it with a plug for her influencer brand. Jewelry made from recycled plastics and empty promises. The comment section was brutal. I didn't need to interfere. The internet was its own beast. But the timing of it all got me thinking. About how people rewrite history when you're not around to tell your version. About how quickly silence becomes permission. So I scheduled a keynote. Not for revenge. For clarity. Vesta was co-sponsoring a new Women in Tech event in the city. The lineup was stacked. And I was set to close the first day with a talk called Building in the Dark. I didn't publicize it. Didn't post teasers. I let the room fill with the right people, investors, founders, ex-classmates, journalists with good memories. I stepped on stage in front of a sold-out crowd and told the story. My story. The quiet beginning. The betrayal. The silence. The rebuild. I never said their names. I didn't need to. The room buzzed with recognition. People leaned in. Some nodded. Some looked stunned. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted longer than I expected. Afterward, people approached me in waves. Handshakes. Business cards. Stories of their own heartbreaks and rebuilds. One woman said, "I wish I had left the way you did." Another whispered, "You made me want to start over." And then, he showed up. Ben. Waiting near the exit, half in the shadows, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit and an expression that tried to be neutral. "That was quite the story," he said. "Isn't it?" I answered. "You always were good with words," he added, like it was a compliment. "You always were good at rewriting them," I said back. He paused, clearly unsure if I was going to let him explain something I didn't need explained. "We didn't know," he said. "About your company. About what you were building." "I know." I let that hang between us. He looked around, clearly hoping someone would interrupt. They didn't. "You're doing well," he said. "Congratulations." "You're marrying her," I replied. "Congratulations." He rubbed the back of his neck. "It wasn't supposed to be like that. With Mia. I thought we were just bored." I offered. "Curious?" He flinched. "You've changed." "No," I said. "I just stopped trying to stay small enough for people like you." He nodded, like he accepted that. Or like he had no choice but to. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Why didn't you say anything that night?" I smiled. "Because I didn't want to waste a single word on a chapter one already knew how to end." I walked past him. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The next day, Mia posted a photo from a bridal fitting. Her smile was tight. The caption was longer than usual. Something about loyalty, trust, and manifesting your dreams. I scrolled past it. I had meetings to run. Code to review. And a call with a venture group in Singapore who wanted to take Vesta global. The girl who once left quietly had become the woman they could never ignore. A month later, I landed in Singapore to finalize the global partnership. The moment I stepped off the plane, it was clear things had shifted. A driver held a sign with my name. The hotel suite had flowers in every room. The conference organizers had put my name at the top of the agenda in bold. Not just as a speaker. As a force. Vesta was being hailed as one of the fastest scaling tech startups led by a solo female founder under 30. And people were paying attention. On the second day of the summit, a founder from Jakarta asked to meet. She had launched a fintech app but was struggling to get traction with male investors. She looked at me like I was the answer. I told her to send me her deck. Before the summit ended, I introduced her to one of our own funders. That connection turned into a $500,000 seed round 6 weeks later. And that's when I realized something. The true revenge wasn't in interviews or passing glances. It wasn't in showing up richer, stronger, or better dressed. The real power was in becoming the person who could lift others. The kind of woman who didn't just escape the wreckage, but who built a lighthouse so others could see their way out, too. Still, I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the little updates. An old classmate sent me a screenshot from LinkedIn. Ben had changed jobs again. A short contract at a digital agency that quietly folded. His tagline now said freelance consultant. Mia had pivoted her brand to wedding content. Engagement rates were dropping. The recycled ring she flashed on Instagram barely got 100 likes. I never commented. Never reached out. But once in a while, I'd see their names pop up on lists, guest lists, PR lists, startup parties. And I'd watch as doors slowly started closing behind them. And me? I was opening more every day. I hosted a roundtable with executives from Tokyo, Sao Paulo, and Berlin. I spoke on a panel in Lisbon about ethical scaling. I joined a mentorship circle with women who had once been overlooked just like I was. Together, we weren't just building companies. We were rewriting the culture. Back home, I kept the luxury apartment. But I rarely stayed in anymore. I was in transit, always moving forward. My team handled most of the operations now, but I still read every onboarding email. Every user feedback form. Every note from a founder who said Vesta helped her feel less alone. One morning, I sat at a cafe in Paris, sipping strong coffee and reading through our company newsletter. In the founder spotlight section, one line stopped me cold. Inspired by a quiet girl who once turned heartbreak into hardware. I didn't recognize the writer. But I didn't need to. That story was traveling on its own now. And it wasn't about Ben. Or Mia. It was about building through silence. Moving through betrayal without turning back. Investing in yourself when no one else will. I closed the newsletter, paid my bill, and walked toward a meeting with a luxury brand looking to sponsor our next summit. The Eiffel Tower glinted in the distance. I used to think closure would come from confrontation. From making them see. But standing there, in another city, on another continent, I knew the truth. I had closed that chapter the moment I decided to write a new one. One they'd never be invited to read. By the time I turned 30, I had spoken at over 100 events, launched Vesta into 9 countries, and been named to every under 30 list that mattered. But none of it felt like a finish line. It felt like a beginning. I wasn't chasing milestones. I was building momentum. Still, sometimes I caught myself remembering that night. The one with the takeout bag. The one where my whole life quietly split in two, the version where I stayed, and the version where I walked out. I owed everything to the second one. That version of me didn't scream. She didn't plead. She packed a suitcase, signed a lease, and got to work. And she never looked back. People ask me now what advice I'd give to someone just starting out. They expect me to say something poetic about resilience or grit. But all I ever say is this: silence is a decision. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's strategy. For me, it was both. One day, while reviewing applications for a new product lead, I saw a familiar name pop up again. Ben. He had applied through a third-party recruiter this time, probably hoping I wouldn't notice. The resume was cleaner now, less bravado, more humility. It almost looked like he'd finally learned something. Almost. I closed the file. Not out of spite. Just clarity. He didn't belong in the next version of this story. That same week, a founder we funded invited me to her product launch. I showed up wearing a black pantsuit and a red lip, the kind of look that makes people ask, who is she? She introduced me as her mentor, her investor, and her inspiration. I didn't flinch. I took the mic and said, she did this herself. I just reminded her she could. That night, while walking back through the city lights, I passed by a tiny restaurant with a chalkboard sign that read, "Your future self is watching. Make her proud." I paused. Thought about the girl I used to be. The one who thought love meant shrinking herself. The one who thought silence meant weakness. She would have never imagined this. This life. This strength. This empire. So I smiled and kept walking. The next morning, I signed a deal with a publishing house. They wanted me to write a book. Not a memoir, they said, something practical. About building, about failure, about making space in a world that often tries to shut the door. I agreed. But I told them the first chapter would always belong to her. The girl in the hallway. The one who chose silence, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she had somewhere better to be. Somewhere louder. Somewhere stronger. Somewhere she belonged. And just like that, I turned the page. The book came out 6 months later. We titled it Quiet Power. It wasn't flashy. The cover was minimalist, soft gray with clean lettering. But inside, every word was sharpened from experience. It wasn't a story about heartbreak. It was a blueprint for rebuilding. We launched the first copies at a Vesta Summit in New York. The room was full of founders, creators, and curious new voices just beginning their climb. I stood backstage, holding a copy, watching the stage crew adjust the lights. And I felt it, how far I'd come. Not just in miles or metrics. But in voice. In presence. I was no longer just the founder. I was a symbol now, for anyone who'd ever been underestimated or quietly replaced. After the panel, women lined up to talk to me. One whispered, "I left him last week. Your first chapter gave me the push I needed." Another said, "You helped me see silence as strength. Not shame." I held every hand. Looked every woman in the eye. I never rushed them. Because I remembered what it felt like to be small. To be invisible. To watch the people who hurt you get celebrated while you disappeared. Not anymore. After the summit, I walked out into the street, turned the corner, and froze. There they were. Ben and Mia. Standing in front of a coffee shop, arguing. Their clothes looked expensive, but something about them looked threadbare. Like they were worn out from pretending. Mia noticed me first. Her lips parted. She gave a half smile. Like we were old friends running into each other on neutral ground. Ben turned next. His eyes met mine. This time, I didn't look away. I didn't pretend not to see them. I just stood there. Still. Calm. Whole. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to lie again, maybe just to fill the air. I didn't give him the chance. I nodded once, then walked past them without a word. Not out of pettiness. Out of peace. Because when you've truly moved on, you don't need a scene. You don't need the final word. You are the final word. I reached the corner and hailed a car to the airport. I had a flight to Berlin. A team to meet. A school to visit. Vesta was launching a scholarship fund. For girls who wanted to learn to code but didn't have the money or the confidence yet. We named the program after my mother, who raised me to think deeply and speak carefully. That night, I stood in front of those students, watching them light up as they unboxed their laptops. One of them asked, "How do you know you've made it?" I smiled. "You don't," I said. Because the goal isn't to make it. It's to make space. For yourself. And for others. The room fell quiet. The good kind of quiet. The kind where something real has just been said. The kind of silence that builds. That protects. That powers everything after. The scholarship fund took off faster than I expected. What began as a one-time donation turned into a global initiative. Vesta partnered with nonprofits across 5 continents. We built classrooms in Nairobi, funded training camps in Manila, hosted virtual intensives in Sao Paulo. Every time a girl submitted her first line of code, I remembered sitting alone in that dark apartment, listening to Ben and Mia laugh in the next room, pretending I couldn't hear. That version of me had been dismissed, overlooked, forgotten. But now she was the reason hundreds of girls had a chance to write something new. I received thank you notes in 3 languages. Some were handwritten, some typed, one embroidered on a handkerchief. But one stood out, a letter from a girl in Istanbul who wrote, "I didn't know girls could lead until I saw your name." I framed it and hung it in my home office. The same one with a full skyline view and a glass wall that opened to the terrace. The same building, still next door to the one I left all those years ago. I never moved out. I didn't need to. The proximity never haunted me, it reminded me. Of what I escaped. Of what I built. Of how close destruction and destiny sometimes are. One morning, sipping tea on my balcony, I saw a moving truck outside their old building. A couple was loading boxes, laughing. A new beginning, maybe. I watched them for a while, then turned back to my screen. Another email. Another pitch. Another girl asking for a chance. I granted it. 2 days later, the Vesta docuseries premiered online. We had filmed it quietly, interviewing users and founders, showing how a tool born in silence became a signal fire for thousands. I didn't narrate it. I didn't need to. My story was in every chapter. In every testimonial. In every face that lit up when they talked about how they'd found direction, or funding, or just belief. A few weeks later, I received a message from an editor at a major magazine. They wanted to profile me. Not just as a founder, but as a symbol. A woman who turned betrayal into a billion-dollar blueprint. I hesitated. I had never told the full story publicly. Parts of it felt so far away now. But then I thought of all the women still on the edge of their own turning point. Still deciding whether to stay silent or step forward. So I said yes. We did the shoot at my office. The stylist brought power suits and soft silks. We picked both. Because strength looks different every day. During the interview, the writer asked, if you could go back, would you change anything? I looked out the window, the sun hitting the exact spot where I once saw them through their curtains. And I said, I wouldn't change a thing. Every quiet step I took away from that pain led me here. The article went viral. Women sent me paragraphs. Men sent apologies. And somewhere out there, I'm sure Ben and Mia read it. But that wasn't the point anymore. They weren't the beginning or the end. They were just the moment I started telling the truth, to myself. When the magazine came out, I mailed a copy to my high school. To the guidance counselor who once told me to consider softer careers. I added a sticky note. It said, she built it anyway. I didn't sign it. I didn't have to. The final piece fell into place on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was reviewing reports in my office, barefoot, hair in a messy bun, when my assistant buzzed in. There's someone here, she said. No appointment, but he says it's personal. I was about to say no, until she added his name. Ben. I sat back. Let the silence fill the space between her words and mine. Send him up, I said. Not because I needed to see him. But because I didn't. That's what power feels like. When you can face the person who tried to break you and feel nothing but certainty in who you've become. He stepped in wearing a suit again. This one fit better. His hair was shorter, his eyes more tired. He held a folder in his hand, but he didn't open it. Hi, he said. Thanks for seeing me. I nodded once. What do you want, Ben? He looked around the office. At the floor-to-ceiling windows. The rows of plants. The books on the shelf. The framed letter on the wall. He looked at me last. I just wanted to say it. I was awful to you. I took you for granted. I lied. I cheated. And you didn't deserve any of it. I waited. Let him sit in the truth of it. I've seen what you built, he added. And I'm proud. Even if I have no right to be. I could have said 100 things. I could have asked why. I could have told him about the nights I cried on subway platforms, or the first pitch that got rejected, or the fear that maybe I really was as invisible as they made me feel. But I didn't. Because none of that mattered anymore. I forgave you a long time ago, I said simply. Not for you. For me. He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for years. Is there anything I can do? Anything at all? Yes, I said, standing. Leave this office knowing your chapter is over. You don't get to rewrite it. You don't get to frame it as part of my origin story. You were the background noise I grew out of. That's all. He looked stunned. And then, finally, understood. He nodded. Turned. And walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. I sat back down, refreshed. Not shaken. Empowered. I opened my laptop and resumed reading a proposal from a teenage founder who built a virtual safety platform after her sister was harassed online. She reminded me of me. Focused. Relentless. Sharp. I approved the funding. That evening, as I left the building, the rain had stopped. The sidewalks glistened. I walked past the old building one last time. The one I had once fled from, silently. The windows were dark. The hallway table where I'd left that takeout bag was gone. So was the girl who held it. I smiled, stepped into the waiting car, and drove into the night. I wasn't running anymore. I was leading. And the only thing louder than the silence I'd left behind was everything I had built in its place.